Death and taxes are inevitable, and you may be able to cheat on taxes, but you can't cheat on death. Today, we're going to talk to an expert, Jon Braddock, on getting your family to prepare for theirs. Welcome to Richer Soul, your journey to a more purposeful, intentional, amazing life. Where are you going to go and how are you going to get there? Let's figure that out together. At the core is the financial well-being to be able to do what you want, when you want, how you want. It's about personal freedom and abundance. If you get a chance, check out the Facebook page, Facebook.com/Richer Soul. I share interesting articles that I've read throughout the week. Also, stop by the website, richersoul.com. There's an email list box that you can sign up for. And from time to time, I will send out an email with some bonus materials. Trust me, I'm not going to spam you, and you won't hear from me very often at all, unless there's something important. So, are you creating the life you deserve? That's a question you need to answer. It happens one step at a time, and it's a journey. And that is where the fun happens. My goal is to help you figure out your puzzle pieces and how they come together to design a great life. That means we have to understand where we're going. In other words, what's our purpose? We also need to be healthy enough to be able to do what we want and have the time to be able to do so. We need the financial resources to fund the life we choose. Living life alone gets kind of lonely, so creating strong relationships and being part of something bigger spiritually. We all know this, and yet we're stuck listening to those voices in our head that hold us back and create fears and prevent us from having the life we deserve. If you haven't had a chance to listen through episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create balance in your life. Too often we have so many competing priorities. We need to find a way to keep them in harmony. Many times work jumps on us, or family pulls us, or our finances go south. Having someone to help you look over all those pieces and keep balance is the job of a conductor. If you want to climb Mount Everest, you need a few Sherpas, guides who know the way and can help get you to the top. In both these roles, it's you who has to do the work. I'm just here to guide, teach, show a path, and share all the mistakes that I've already made. Before we meet Jon, I want to remind you of the compound interest curve. It applies to more than just money. It applies to everything we do in life. So just remember, if you took a penny and you doubled it every day, at the end of a month, you'd have $10 million. And while we can't always double our money every day, we can slowly and surely continue to take a small step forward to improve ourselves every single day. The thing you have to keep in mind when you look at that curve and you look at that penny doubling every day is on day 20, you've only got $5,000. You've come so far, and yet you have so little. But from day 20 to day 31, you go from $5,000 to $10 million. Explosive growth in those last 11 days. But you're never going to have the last 11 days if you don't have the first 20. And you're not going to have those until you take that first step and you continue to improve yourself and keep going. So, let's talk about one of those steps, the one we can't cheat ourselves out of, death. And let's talk about reducing stress for our families and our loved ones as they have to take the time to clean up your estate. Welcome to Richer Soul, Jon. It's great to have you join us today.
Well, thank you so much, Rocky. It's a pleasure to be on Richer Souls with you.
It's a pleasure to have you. Let's start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Very good question. Growing up, I grew up in the 60s and 70s out in the New Jersey area. The school system really taught me nothing about money, save for the early math classes where Susie buys a certain number of apples and how many does she have left and what did it cost her. My parents were very close to the vest about things like money, meaning growing up, I had really no idea what my parents made, how much they earned, etc. My brother and I did receive an allowance for typical chores and, mowing our grass and doing those things, as well as when we were a little older, going out and mowing lawns for neighbors and such. But there was really no open dialogue about money and saving and growing and investing and doing those kind of things. Money went along with, I think, religion and politics as the things that people just really never talked about, at least in my family.
That's fine. And it's interesting. Everyone has a different story. Have you done anything different with your kids to teach them about money?
Yes, with our children, we've been a little bit more aggressive in understanding, helping them to understand the value of a dollar. They've all worked growing up. Allowances really weren't given for doing things around home. Those would just be more expectations. And they've all learned to work and save if there's something that they really want. And we help guide them through that process.
That's wonderful. I think it's important that parents take the responsibility to teach their kids. Otherwise, it doesn't sound like anyone else is doing a very good job at it.
Not that I have experienced.
And we'll talk about it a little bit later in the show because you were involved in benefits and companies, and part of that is retirement savings and pension plans and all of the benefits from companies. So we'll dig in a little further as to how you're educating people with those. The main reason we're here today, though, is to talk about one of the two inevitables in life, which are death and taxes. And while you can cheat on taxes, I don't think you can cheat on death.
So true.
We know it's inevitable, and yet people don't want to talk about it. Do you know why?
Well, it's interesting. You're absolutely right. The two things that are inevitable are, in fact, death and taxes. And yeah, we can cheat on our taxes. We won't cheat death. According to my best guess, people have been on this planet for about 300,000 years. And so far, 1 out of 1 of us ultimately will pass away. We actually conducted a national survey of baby boomers a little over a year ago and asked that very question. Why do people not talk about it or share it? And one of the overwhelming responses we received was, it's just not comfortable. It's not pleasant to talk about my own demise. And in fact, it might be bad luck, which I always laugh at, because as I tell people, I say we're all too free to talk about sex, and yet that doesn't make us pregnant. On the same lines, I don't believe talking about death is going to make us dead. I think the responsible thing for people to do is to have a conversation. We all know and understand that our time is limited here. By having a constructive conversation about that with those that we love, we stand to improve the experience that our loved ones have after we have gone greatly by doing so.
That's very true. I've had to handle 2 estates. And the first estate went so smoothly. I was aware of all the situations. I knew what the expectations were. I knew where all the paperwork could be found. I had access to everything. And literally, we were able to clean up the entire estate inside of 6 months. It went that smoothly. And then we were involved in a second estate. We could not find the paperwork, and we didn't know where the safety deposit box was, or we thought we knew, but things weren't as we expected. And that estate, I think, took over a year and a half, was full of stress, We paid over $20,000 in legal fees. We had to pay insurance to have bonding of me as the executor to the count of thousands more dollars. And the first 6 months, I think, was just all the money was locked up, and we were just sitting and waiting for the state to finally say, yes, you can have access. In the meantime, we had bills in the thousands of dollars a month to maintain the house, which was out of state, and, pay people to mow the lawn and to shovel the snow and to pay the taxes and all of the current bills and debts. And it was an absolute disaster. And we even talked about it a little bit beforehand. And we talked about, you need to get these, like, I gave them the paperwork and said, I don't care what you put on here. This is what needs to get done. Let's fill it out and get it done. And unfortunately, it didn't get done. And so we got stuck with a massive mess. So I encourage people to have this conversation.
And it's so true. And I have, over the course of the last 3 years, spoken with so many people who wish to share their experiences that they've had. And very few. You've had one fortunate experience where things were organized, things were clearly listed out where things were and how to get through things, and you could get through it fairly rapidly. But that's the exception. As I indicated at the top of the show, I grew up in the 60s and 70s in a small town in New Jersey. And, death was a little easier then. Of course, it's still pretty easy to accomplish death now. But when someone died back then, everything that a person would need to know to close things out, likely within the next 30 to 60 days would show up in the mailbox. That was something that sat out front of the house, if you recall, which today collects flyers and birthday cards from my mother and nothing more, because bills don't come there to me any longer. And most of the documentation that people had was, in a desk drawer in the house. And most people knew who the attorney was because there was only one or two in town. There was one bank where everyone banked, and everyone knew where the funeral home was. While stressful, you could get through the process, fairly easily. And when a person passes, there are some normal emotions and not normal emotions. And the normal emotions are grief and sadness. And there's nothing we can do about that, nor do we want to, because I think that's part of the healing process. But the not normal emotions are stress, frustration, anger, confusion. Those are what now today get attached when someone passes. If we think about it, we don't, or many people don't receive their bills in the mailbox. They get them in their inbox. And many things are set up on automatic pay through accounts. We have some file folders, but we have more loans than ever before. We have insurance policies and safety deposit boxes. Today we have massive amounts of family photos that don't sit in a 3-ring binder on the coffee table any longer. They're tied up in our technology and put away, including, videos. And then other important documentations, not to mention social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. At least 2 or 3 times a year, I receive notifications on my LinkedIn account to wish so-and-so a happy birthday. Sadly, so-and-so has been deceased for several years, and there were never any instructions for taking down his account. And while Facebook has been good about now establishing, the ability for an individual to list a legacy contact within their account, if a person hasn't done that, that Facebook page goes on and on. In our case, what really opened our eyes to it, I spent 35 years in the financial services world, employee benefits, working with retirement plans, life insurance, etc. But it wasn't until my father-in-law passed away just 4 years ago that I was thrust in with my wife to the realities of what it takes to close out a person's estate. My father-in-law was 88 years old when he passed, and he thought very organized, but he had never shared any information with us. My mother-in-law, they were married for 63 years. She hadn't written a check or paid a bill or done anything financially in that 63 years. So she was no help in trying to access things. When we found a safe deposit box key, we assumed it was at the bank where he had his homeowner line of credit, his checking, and his savings accounts. But it wasn't. It took us weeks to track down and locate the bank that had that safe deposit box, which was at an institution on the other side of town at which he had no other accounts. We have no idea why it was there. We searched for insurance policies. We searched for deeds to the house and proof of ownership. We found a will, which was interesting. Again, always encourage people to have a will. My wife and I are the tail end of the baby boomers. We're in our early 50s. And when we found the will, I said to my wife, I said, Michelle, I have some bad news for you. You're going to have to go live with your Aunt Jean and Uncle Ed. and what I think the listener can deduce from that is the will hadn't been updated since the early 60s. So that process took us basically a year to go through everything, track down, contact insurance companies. When you find all these life insurance policies that have been in boxes for years, you're now left with making phone calls and going through things. Are there policies? What's in force? Are we missing anything? What about veterans benefits? And the list goes on and on and on. All of which is totally and completely avoidable if there was just a conversation. And the conversation being, here's where I bank, here's where the safe deposit box is, here's the life insurance that's active so you don't burn yourself out, here's where the stock certificates are located, and on.
Absolutely. I guess in your case, you had a living spouse that was alive. In the case where there isn't one, it becomes even harder. And then I guess there's certain things that I found are triggered. And I guess it's the funeral home reports to some agency that someone has passed away, which automatically reports to Social Security, which automatically shuts down a lot of accounts. And I also learned through that process is sometimes it's best not to say that someone died. Because took us so long to sell the house, I learned don't tell the home insurance company that the person died, just keep paying the bill, because if you tell them that they died, your house becomes empty. And after 6 months, they want to kick you out of the policy.
Exactly.
And if you're sitting through a year and a half, so you really have to be intentional and purposeful in who and how you tell and how you deal with each individual organization in their life that you have to clean up. And it can be a massive, massive mess.
That's so true. In that case where it goes on and you have a house to sell, if the individual has not clearly indicated where assets are located, be it cash, be it life insurance policies, etc., you or the family now bears the brunt of paying those mortgage payments, keeping the utilities turned on if you live in an area where the house has to be cooled or heated so that pipes don't break, and work to track down these things while you're trying to get the death certificate filed with the insurance companies and get the claims paid so that you can finally pay those things out, which, the big one is, on top of that stress and frustration, is money that many times family members might not have access to those kind of funds to keep those things going. The one thing we experienced, which was interesting, going through this process, and we were fortunate that my wife's father was in town, so we were close. I can't imagine having to go through this if they were on the other side of the country. And the amount of time it took us to search and track down things, which has to be done 9 to 5. That, for any typical employer, while they are very sympathetic and provide the bereavement leave for a few days. But most times they expect when the person comes back to work, they're going to be doing their job and not spending, 2 or 3 hours of company time on the telephone trying to track down assets of the deceased.
And that is a difficult process. I remember driving from bank to bank to bank and saying, hey, was there a safety deposit box here? In one of the banks where there actually was a box in the past, they said, no, we have no record of that. It's surprising to me, but banks and safety deposit boxes are horrible. Like, it's a whole separate record-keeping system. So they literally can't just type your name into a computer and get an answer, it seems. Or at least that's what we found in many of the banks that we dealt with. And the one bank said, no, there was never a box here. And we went back and we found payments to that box from a year, like probably about 2-3 years prior. Came back and said, hey, I've got payments showing there was a box in this branch. Why can't you find it? And then eventually I think they told us it was closed out. But it was quite difficult to get through all of that.
And let's not forget that just because the family locates a safe deposit box key and we identify the institution to which it belongs, and even with a death certificate, unless you go through the process of getting a power of attorney, they're not going to let you in that safe deposit box.
I was lucky in that I was the executor, so I had documentation from the state to let me do things, but that took quite a while to get done.
And it's quite a process
to figure out. And it was quite stressful, as you mentioned. So, quick question. With all this social media that people own, I'm assuming if you don't know the password to it, if you contact the social media platforms, do they just shut them down and wipe them out, or what do they do?
People that I have spoken to who have been through the process, it has taken as much as a full year to get them to actually take down the account if you don't have access to it. An individual who I reference in my book that I published earlier this summer, he spent about a year of letter writing back and forth with Facebook just to have his mother-in-law's Facebook account finally turned off because they didn't want the constant reminder. You've got your old friends that are, out there on Facebook as an example who be, posting to your account saying, hey, John, I haven't heard from you in a while, you son of a gun. How come you're not posting? Whoops, that's kind of embarrassing.
I think what happened in that case is that other people posted to the page that person had passed away. That kind of at least sent the notifications out to everyone else that was the case.
And you can establish the legacy contact in there, which works very well when it's set up. But short of that, if people don't want to do it, and you don't have to share it with people now, but write it down. What is your username? What is your password? How do they access it? And what do you want done with the account? Do you want it taken down completely? Do you want it set up more as a memorialization so that people can't really post it there, but you can list out, kind of obituary and funeral arrangements and those kind of things so that people can see it? But it's all about having this information readily and immediately available to your family when something happens, because it goes so much further than just social media. If we think about all the things that we have today beyond Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter and those accounts, we have, what about your Amazon or Amazon Prime account? What about Netflix? What about Hulu? What about all your credit cards that are out there? What about your subscription? I read 2 newspapers every day, but they don't show up in the driveway. They show up on my iPad, and they're on auto renew. And unless my wife knows how to get into my iPad and access the Wall Street Journal account and discontinue the subscription, it's going to continue to hit her credit card, our credit card, for months on the back end. And so all these things are these little details that technology has made our lives so simple today. But yet when we leave, it makes it so complex and difficult. So it's incumbent upon us to have this stuff organized so that we know that when we're gone, we're not adding on top of the sadness and grief, anger, stress, frustration, confusion, financial issues to our family. And the other big one too, which starts immediately, as you know, so many people don't talk about things. And a good friend of mine, Nick, had said, I wish I had known Mom wanted to be cremated before I buried her. Nick now lives with the memory of he ultimately didn't honor his mother's final wishes. And if you have multiple children, Michelle and I have 6 children, I can guarantee you that we can't all decide on where to go to dinner or what movie to see. How in the heck, if I don't clearly list out what my wishes are and they know, they're going to say, no, Dad wanted to be buried. No, he wanted to be cremated. No, he wants a religious ceremony. No, he would have just wanted a memorial service. And, you know, people have said that death is a time that brings family closer together. I wholeheartedly disagree. I think it can become one of the most divisive times in a family because people won't agree and everyone thinks that they know what Mom or Dad better than their sibling.
And that probably starts a ton of family fights, especially
Indeed.
when money is involved and one person wants something but isn't willing to write the check for it to occur.
Exactly. But yet it's so avoidable because all we have to do is have this information clearly spelled out where family can access it when the time comes.
So how do you get the loved ones that you know you're going to have to deal with this to actually do it? Because that seems to be a difficult task.
Depending on the age bracket, yes. You know, the silent generation, my parents who are in their 80s at this point, you know, they grew up and they lived that life of, you know, we don't talk about money and we don't talk about politics and religion and all those kind of things. And so it's very difficult to get them to have the conversation. We've tried several strategies, one of which is just having that conversation with them, just saying, look, you know, Mom, what if this happens? Can we just talk about that? Where do we want this? My mother won't go on a computer and do anything except, you know, send a periodic email. But she has a notebook now where she has everything listed out, who their attorney is, who their accountant is, where their bank accounts are located, where the will is it in the safe deposit box, where the key can be found in the safe deposit box to access it, and everything else. So it's all spelled out clearly. So she's gotten over that hump. And so while some of our silent generation might not want to talk about it because that's just the way they are, at least get them some kind of an organizer where say, look, you don't have to talk to me about this stuff. I don't need to know, but I am going to have to figure this out at some point in time. Please just write it down and put it somewhere, you know, where I can find it. Somewhere safe, by the way.
Another issue is that, you know, many of us are now spread across the entire country and even the entire world. If you're not living where you're close to your parents, that requires travel, and then you've got to search a house and find all these things, and hopefully they're there. But if they're not, that creates some major issues.
It does.
And I was thinking about this as it's kind of like there's techniques people use to achieve a goal that they have struggled with. For example, you know, if I want to give up doing something, one of the things they tell people is to make a bet to give money to an organization that's 100% opposite of everything you believe in. So if you're a conservative, you make a bet with your good friend to give $1,000 to a liberal organization in your name. And they say that motivates people more so to change the habit that they want to change. And I thought this probably would work in conversations with family who refuse to talk about death and explain how things should go, is to literally just start joking with them and telling them what you're going to do after they die, which would be 100% opposite of what they'd want, solely to force them to sit down and write it out, because that is a major struggle. I don't know if you've got, like, what do you do when people refuse to do it?
Procrastination is, the hardest one. I like what you just said, and I won't share any kind of, political ideology or anything else, but I know my father as an example. If in that case, like what you mentioned, if I were to say to him, look, if you don't have this stuff all clearly done, I'm going to take everything, sell everything, and every dime is going to go to X political party. That would motivate him quickly to do something. He'd be like, no, you can't do that. So the other thing, because people procrastinate, we talk about this all the time, and people are like, well, I have time to get it organized. It's like, really? This is not taxes. Yes, I know that I can wait until April 15th without too much consequences if I wish to procrastinate that long to file my taxes. But I don't have a date certain. I hope I live to be 100 years old and have all my faculties. But, over 7,600 people woke up in the United States alone today. They expect that they'll do that tomorrow, but they won't. We don't know who it is. So that's why we can't procrastinate. And when we speak with people, they say, well, there's just so much. I just get overwhelmed. It's like, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. If a person's trying to lose weight or get in shape, and we see all the infomercials and all the solutions that are out there, there's nothing that says wake up tomorrow morning 40 pounds lighter. But what it does say is in just 3 months, 90 days, 12 weeks, you can lose 12 pounds or 20 pounds by doing these simple steps. And so we like to encourage people is let's start with the easy stuff. The low-hanging fruit. What are your funeral desires? Where do you want to be buried, if buried or cremated, et cetera, et cetera? Are there people who should be notified? Old college roommates or people across the country who might not see a local obituary? Organize that. That doesn't take that long. Do that next week. Then, how's it going to be paid for? Because, funeral homes and funeral directors are wonderful people, and they do have all the empathy in the world. I don't know how they do the job that they do. But while they're telling you how sorry they are for your loss, they are handing you a bill that's going to need to be paid. And so it's important that we let our family know, these are what are the things that I want when I pass, and here's how you should pay for it. And then just start listing out all the other things and set a 90-day goal to go from this world of chaos and stress where we have all of our stuff scattered about and get it all organized till you're in a calm, happy, and organized place in just 90 days. And then let family know that it's done. You don't have to have a Debbie Downer conversation. Oh, I'm going to die someday. Just say, look, in the event I'm not here, this is where you're going to find everything you need to know.
That's a phenomenal idea. Do funeral homes expect payment before services are provided, before the final things are done, or are you allowed to pay later? Because I know in the situation we dealt with, the same funeral home in both places, I had to give them a check immediately.
I think they're all different. In our case, and I cannot recall whether they needed something down up front, but I do know that the full balance needed to be paid in 30 days. So we had 30 days to pay it. I don't know what happens if you don't pay it, but I believe they're all different. And as you say, in your case, they required, payment up front when you were there. So I think they're all different.
I mean, in that case, they really have no recourse. So, and they probably know that most people at that time and situation may not have the money to pay or may be stuck at that point. And so they don't want to get stuck with a bill where they can't do anything about it.
And it can take several weeks to get the death certificates and get those then sent along with a claim form to a life insurance company to collect life insurance proceeds. So, when a person passes, it can take 30, 60, 90 days or longer to ultimately receive the life insurance proceeds of the deceased person, which means many times family is going to have to write that check first, unless I clearly spell out the family, look, there's money in this account, use that for this, file the life insurance. And
my kids are still under 18, but once they clear 18, we will probably put their names on accounts so that they have easier access to things. And I know all of our accounts have paid on death and they have all of the appropriate designations everywhere, but it makes it a lot easier. You can even put your kids on the safety deposit box. You can put one of them. If you know who's going to be the executor of your will, you put them on the safety deposit box. They can walk into the bank, not say a single word, open the safety deposit box, get whatever they need to handle the estate, and walk out, and no worries.
Exactly.
I think if you trust your kids, you need to go through the process of setting all of that up.
Mm-hmm. Particularly for those, our children range in age from 32 down to 18. At what point do you let them know or put someone on that, who's going to be the most responsible one to handle things for me at this point? But yes, I think including them in the payable on death at the bank accounts and those things are phenomenal ways to get the cash into their hands so they can finalize things. And of course, having a will which trumps everything at the end, so that ultimately the distribution of everything is done according to your plan.
And you have some products and some books to help people with this whole process?
Well, I do. 4 years ago, when my father-in-law passed away, my wife, Michelle, spent an enormous amount of time at her mother's house with her mom, going through things. I was there initially early on, and finally, it was just one of those things that was a little bit better for her to do with her mom. And so I sat home in the evening while she was up there sorting through things and just thinking through things quietly. I thought, this is crazy. People have been dying for 300,000 years, and it just gets more and more complicated. And everyone I spoke to has similar stories. Oh, let me tell you about when my brother passed away, or these things. And so I started out just jotting down everything I could think of that was going through, our experience. Is there a will? Where is it located? Is there a safe deposit box? Where's the key? And right through retirement plans and assets and everything that a person could need to know. And I published the My Life and Wishes Organizer on Amazon. Just self-published it, put it out there in hopes that people would take this, write all this stuff down, and keep it in a safe place so it would make it easier for the family. I was involved in the financial services world and employee benefits during that time, and we were making this available to our clients to give to all their employees, and they loved it. They thought this was just a great thing. And as time went on, I kept thinking of more things that should be added because things continue to change. We change passwords and we get new accounts. And so it would require a really good number 2 pencil to keep changing these things within the organizer. Then ultimately, if it's all written down, And in my desk drawer, is it safe? I could have a fire. My heart goes out to all the people in Houston, southern Texas, on the heels of Harvey. Those people have lost everything. If they had all those paper files and everything at home, it's gone. The people on the heels of Irma down in Florida, devastating with the flooding and homes destroyed and things blown away. And so we moved to an online platform, which took us about 2 years to build, at mylifeandwishes.com, which intuitively walks the user through listing out all the things that a person would need during time, taking them from this disorganized state to this very organized state where they can list everything, they can upload copies because we are all over the world, and have everything stored and secured in one single place. Then you have the ability to add authorized users, such as the responsible child or someone else who would know where these things are. Many people list a financial advisor or an attorney who can also upload and keep things current. It's very easy to make changes as changes are needed. So everything is in one location. So with my children, they know, look, we're not going to have a bummer of a conversation here, but yes, someday I will die. And when I do, all you have to do is, and the title of my new book, which is Click Here When I Die, that's all they'll need to do. It will give them access to everything that they will need to know.
You've made it simple for people.
Trying to. When we went through this frustration, and you've been through it, Rocky, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. So my first thought was, my objective is to help at least 1 million families avoid the pain and frustration that we went through. And it should be very simple for them to do that. And best of all, the fact that now, we've got all this stuff and we're being proactive and thinking we want it to be easy for our family when we're gone. More importantly, I've gotten completely organized. I have everything organized. I know where it is. If I need something, I know how to access it. If I forget a password, I know where I have it saved in my account. I can go in and say, oh, yeah, that's what it was.
We talk about living life intentionally. And in this case, planning your death should also be intentional, to leave your family the gift of peace behind and not a year of stress. I think everyone needs to start having these conversations to make sure that things are done properly and in accordance to what their wishes are.
Exactly. We do live intentionally and we do live on purpose. For the most part, we are all planners. We plan everything in our lives. We plan for the birth of our children. We planned what schools that they're going to go to. We plan and talk to them about peer pressure and right and wrong and safe sex. And, we plan for our retirement. We work hard. We do all these things. The only thing that so many of us are missing is the one final piece. Just plan for our own passing. And it's really not that hard.
No, it isn't. And you've made it easier. You also mentioned that you spent quite a long time in the world of benefits. Today, clearly, benefits packages at companies have become rather nice. Health insurance, one of the biggest benefits we all need. 401ks for retirement. I think the days of pensions for most people, unless they work in the government sector, are kind of now gone. And so people need to be much more aware of what benefits they have available to them. What have you seen with regards to people utilizing all the benefits that the companies offer?
Yes, benefits are so critical. And for 35 years, I was involved in the employee benefit financial services world. One of my biggest frustrations, if I can share, is that employers work so hard and spend so much money on making these benefits available to their employees. Then they have open enrollment time and they have benefit meetings to explain all the features of these benefits and how they can help people. And participation is slim. People don't show up to learn about the benefits that are being offered to them and how they can help their families. Don't get me wrong, people participate always right away in the health insurance unless they have it, again, with a spouse somewhere, because that's critical. And dental insurance and those kind of things. Retirement plans, the 401k, I always refer to that as the free money plan. Just put some money in there because most employers match that money that goes in. And so many people, a lot of younger people I speak to, I think, oh, no, I can't afford to put any money in to a retirement plan yet. It's like, hello? Look, if you put $1 on the table, I'll give you $1. Do you want that deal? They're like, well, sure. But they need to understand how they can help them and benefit them. And the other one, which is really, I think, important, is life insurance. So many people that I've spoken with through the years think that they are adequately protected because their employer provides them with some life insurance. But that life insurance that's provided is designed to provide coverage while they're an active employee of the company. And in most cases, when they terminate their employment, be it job change or retirement, that life insurance stops. And if people are relying solely on that to provide for their families, statistically, it never will. And so most employers offer voluntary life insurance where employees can get additional coverage for themselves and their families. Many times it's a permanent kind of insurance, like a whole life or a universal life. Few people participate in those. And if a person hasn't already worked with their professional insurance agent outside to get some kind of life insurance that will ultimately be there, they need to take advantage of it. Because as I say, the only good life insurance is the life insurance that I have on the day that I die.
Absolutely. Otherwise, and with term life, it's not going to pay. And I would assume as people age, they start to drop off their life insurance because they have assets or they have less requirements. As your kids become adults, you're less worried about having to take care of them. And once you're on Social Security, it may be even less of an issue as well, that you don't need to protect anything.
Correct. And everyone's situation is different. We speak with people who, maybe were just a, hard-working individual their whole life and gave to their family and didn't have a lot of money saved up in retirement. And they might need some kind of small life insurance policy to take care of final expenses for funeral service, burial, and those sort of things. But yes, as we age, our need for life insurance goes down. With younger children, we need all we can get. I mean, face it, realtors today are great. They sell us wonderful homes that we absolutely love that require the income of usually two people to continue to make the house payments on. God forbid something happens to one of those breadwinners, the last thing you want to see happen is when someone dies and now the family's grieving that they also have to move because they can't afford to stay in the home. So people need to think through their whole strategies, because the one thing we don't know is when we'll leave, and we need to be prepared for that.
That's correct. And I think at a minimum for most people, especially if you're younger, 10 times income is probably worth it. And if you have a non-working spouse and you've got kids, you should also think about insuring them, because if you have to go to work and you now have to pay for full-time daycare and for all of the things that the spouse was doing for you, that costs quite a bit of money. So you need to sit down and be intentional with whatever your lifestyle is and make sure that both of the people are well covered with life insurance. And life insurance is so cheap for term life, it makes absolutely no sense not to have a considerable amount. If you unfortunately die early, at least you leave behind the money to take care of your spouse and kids and take care of them well.
Absolutely. And so important. So important.
I've been lucky all my life to have phenomenal benefits packages, and I don't know if people actually read through and see what they are, but I get money for volunteering for my kids. I get matching donations when I make donations to charities. I get a whole host of other benefits that I don't know if everyone takes advantage of and actually goes through the package to read all of the different things that are available, and that can dramatically help you and put more money in your pocket for the taking.
Oh, yes. And here's a suggestion for the listener. When your benefit enrollment period comes up, which likely will be this fall, and you get that packet of information, take it home, give it to your spouse, and have them read it. Because your spouse, many times, you're so wrapped up in your world so often that you're just thinking, okay, well, I've got all these things, and I sat through that meeting last year, and blah, blah, blah. Give it to your spouse. Let them look through it. And vice versa. If you both work, swap packages. See what's there, because the other person might see something that may be of benefit. And I'm not saying that many people don't sit down and as a couple and talk through everything that's available to them, and I hope that they do. But what usually happens for most of us is after a long day at work and we get home, and then we change into our comfortable clothes, and then we play with the kids for a while, and then we sit and we have dinner, and then it's time for baths and maybe read some stories before they go to bed. And the time we get them tucked in and sit down and have the first time to take a breath at the end of the day, many times the last thing we want to do is talk about all this paperwork and stuff.
It's probably also important to know vesting dates. And if you're in a situation where you get bonuses, like because a lot of people switch jobs a lot now. And so be aware of vesting dates. It might be worth it to stay another 2-3 months to get your vest. And other times it's not. But be intentional and look at all the dates and all the information to make sure you understand what it is and how it works.
Absolutely. And, alternatively, if a person is, looking at other jobs or has other offers, always beyond the paycheck, look at the benefits and do the comparisons. Many times we'd speak with people who were looking at going to another employer who's going to pay a few dollars an hour more. But the present employer have 401k plan with a 5% matching contribution. The new employer, who's going to pay them a little bit more money, had a much smaller matching contribution within a plan. So, many times what might look like more money in the long run may not be.
Well, and even with the cost of health insurance being so high, companies are paying less and less of it. You should find out, how much is it going to cost for health insurance for my family in your organization? How does that compare to what I'm currently paying? Because that could be a dramatic shock when you get that first paycheck.
Exactly.
So we always like to talk about self-improvement and making ourselves better. Have you ever worked with a coach?
I have. I spent about 15 years in a program called Strategic Coach, founded by a gentleman named Dan Sullivan and his wife Babs Smith. Probably one of the greatest experiences in my life. Working with a coach, strategic coach, helped me in my business and in my planning, thinking through strategies and steps that helped improve me as an individual, helped improve our company as we grew and built our company. Probably the biggest part is working with someone who has made mistakes along the way, and their advice helps me to avoid making mistakes as I go forward.
Interesting insight. And I think that's a good thing when you look at a coach, is to make sure they have the experiences and the mistakes so that they can help you not have to go through that trouble and those downturns. Learn from other people's mistakes as much as you can instead of making them yourself. That's great insight.
Thank you.
As we wrap up here, is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience?
I think the biggest thing that I can say is to have a conversation and be organized. I like to tell people, just be thoughtfully prepared. It could be the greatest gift ultimately that you could leave to your family, eliminating the stress, the anger, the confusion, and certainly saving them an enormous amount of time and money. One thing I'd like to do, if it's acceptable, is we have a report, an ebook, if you will, called The 10 Things You Need to Know. I think it will help the listener, by downloading the report, move down the path of the things that they need to think about in the organization process. And they can find that at mylifeandndwishes.com/podcast.
Excellent. And I'll make sure to put that in the show notes too, so people can easily click on it and download that resource.
Wonderful.
I thank you for joining us today, and you've shared some great insights, and hopefully people will not only do this for themselves and for their families, but can hopefully convince those that they're going to have to handle the estate for to take the steps and put things in place so that when the inevitable happens, it is not that stressful and terrible experience that sometimes it becomes.
Do it for love.
Do it for love. Perfect. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
I encourage you to check out Jon's site, mylifeandwishes.com. I'll put a link in the show notes and also a link to the free ebook that you have there. Having to deal with cleaning up an estate that was a mess was an extremely stressful time in my life. I would never want to let my kids go through that. The other thing I learned is just how much useless junk we accumulate and how little it means. Over the years, we've done our best to start cleaning out the junk in our house. I don't want to deal with it now. I sure don't want to have my kids deal with it with multiple dumpsters later. So decluttering and getting rid of stuff that no longer has much meaning really helps to bring a lot of joy and peace into our daily lives. And as we talked about, you need to be intentional. It's the key to get the results you want, and that's what you learned from Jon, as well as having a coach to help prevent mistakes and keep you on track, being invaluable. If there's someone you know who could benefit from what we talked about today, please share it. If you have parents or loved ones or others in your family who you're going to have to deal with estates for, this episode might create the conversation getting started so that it's a little bit easier to have. I know your family will appreciate it after the fact. So, what small step can you make this week to improve your life or plan for your death? Sometimes the step is just starting something new, and other times it's eliminating something that prevents you from success. And remember, that first step is the one that's leading you down that compound curve. So, what's preventing you from moving forward? And who are you putting on your team to help build the life you deserve? When you're ready to take massive action, I'm here to help you build your path and create the life you deserve. Thanks for listening. Email me, Rocky@RicherSoul. Have an abundant week.